Thank you so much. And just before I start, I just really want to endorse that awesome presentation and really just to endorse the critical role of general practice. That data around over 70% of mums attending general practice in the first trimester is very important, and data that we quite often forget. And there are many opportunities, but of course we know that if we want to impact in pregnancy on the negative effects of smoking, it's in the first trimester that we really need to be doing it, and so that's where our role is so critical. But these pregnant ladies, they slip in and out of the practices in funny ways. You know, they might see a nurse and not have the discussion, or you might just order a blood test and they don't come back, or you only just get a scan report and nothing else, you know. But the reality is that there are ways for us to identify and look, so here is someone who's pregnant and they're smoking, what can we do to support this? And those success rates in that program are really awesome. You know, well over 50% success rates, which is really great. So the other day I was talking in my practice to a patient that had presented with hemoptysis, and an older chap that was a smoker, and I sent him for an X-ray, and of course it came back with a shadow, and it just reminded me of the motivation for being involved in this work. You know, I mean, I know that guy's heading for lung cancer diagnosis. I don't want to be diagnosing another person with lung cancer. I want to be preventing that by getting in early and making a difference around the smoking. And so that's my personal motivation around smoking, and why I'm keen to be involved, and why I support the ministry as a primary care advisor. But if you look at the data internationally, of which there is lots of, this is just one example showing how much life is lost from smoking. And you can Google this. It's called the Million Women Study. If you just Google Million Women Study, you'll just get the study straight up on Google, and you just look through these graphs and you can find this. They'll also be in the handouts. And it's worth some study of this. I don't want to go through in detail because I have presented this here before, I think last year, but you can see that from midlife on, you lose on average as a woman 11 years, and it's been verified for men too. So that's where that comment comes, that smoking causes over a decade of years lost. It's true, and it's been shown in this very large study. So it's the individuals that motivate us, of course, but this is why we need a population approach to make a big difference here. The really good thing that came out of that study, though, was that in spite of the fact that there's a threefold increase in mortality if you are a current smoker, so this one for never smoked and threefold increase for current smokers. But if you actually quit by midlife, your increase in mortality is only 1.5. So in other words, quitting even in midlife is worthwhile. Quitting by 40 only increased by 1.2. But look down here. If you quit when you're in your 20s, you hardly have any increased lifetime risk at all. Now, I'm not telling my 20-year-old smokers, hey, you've got another 10 years of smoking, you're going to be able to get away with it. But the reality is that here's our motivation for getting stuck in and helping young smokers quit, because actually if they quit, basically they're going to be okay. I just want to draw your attention, if you haven't seen them, I'm not going to play them, but just to remind you, and even if you've played them before, go and have a look at them again. These are on YouTube, a series of clips from the Smoke-Free Nurses group. It was an awesome Auckland-based group, it was a national group of course, that have produced these videos. If you just put in YouTube, Smoke-Free Nurses, what smokers really want, or even just what smokers really want, you'll find these clips. This is the introductory one, you'll recognise it, and there's 10 others. They're only 2 minutes long, and they're smokers talking about what they expect from their doctors and nurses, which basically the message is, I want professional help to quit. And it's a really interesting to hear that, because it fits with the data, which I must be coming to later because the slides are not there, but it fits with the data that shows that nationally, in any 1 year, over half of all smokers will actually have a 1-week attempt at quitting. And we know they're not successful on their own, and that's why they need support. But actually most smokers do want to quit, and that's our motivation for wanting to get in and offer the opportunity to help them and support them. So that was just by way of kind of the background. I just want to spend a couple of minutes updating where we're up to nationally, just to kind of put into perspective before I go on to talking about vaping and the role of vaping to quit. And this is about the fact that to help people stop smoking, we really have kind of like two broad approaches. We have the public health approach and we have our individual approach. And so our job as clinicians is to work with our individual patients and offer them the opportunity to quit. And if you keep offering them opportunity, you're just going to hit some people at the point where they're ready, and then you can either manage that yourself or you can refer them, and that is likely to be very successful. We know that that one-to-one offering is really important, and it's going to help some people quit. But of course, if we want to help the population quit, we have to turn to our public health colleagues who are planning public health approaches, which is what drives the whole process in the first place. And those of you who have been around long enough to have experienced what it was like before all this started around 2008 will recall that talking about smoking with people in the early 2000s was actually not that easy. People were not very interested. You certainly had to work hard to engage somebody in smoking cessation. These days, you get people coming in and saying, I want you to help me stop smoking. I want to go on Champix. Can you refer me for smoking cessation? You know, we've had a huge turnaround, and it's so much easier now when you raise the issue. There are things I can do to help you stop smoking. People are interested in that. The other day I was with a student in the practice, and a patient had come in with what looked like gout, and I happened to notice on the dashboard that smoking hadn't been updated, and I thought I would sort of do a little teaching thing here for the student, So I thought, how will I get into this, So I said, how's your general health? And I said, how's your fitness getting on? And she said, my fitness is fine, but straight up like this, she said, but it's really bad because I'm smoking and I want to stop. I was staggered, I mean, it was supposed to be a teaching opportunity on how to motivate somebody to get in there. I didn't even have to do that because the person just said, hey, what can you do to help me stop smoking? And I don't find that a very uncommon experience. So I know sometimes we've got to work a little bit hard at it, but it's a way different experience now to what it is. And I think that's largely because of how our public health colleagues have helped us, and what they're currently doing is updating the smoke-free 2025 Aotearoa smoke-free goal. That's trying to get us smoke-free as a country. That's definitely below 5%. We are world leaders in this, and that's a great place to be. Trying to reduce the daily smoke tobacco use to less than 5%. And they're working on really 4 items now that will shift us further ahead, trying to reduce the affordability, availability, appeal and addictiveness of smoking. And it's just important for us to know this because these are supporting the kind of work we're doing. So affordability, increasing the tax on a regular basis. That's something that's important to do, and it needs to continue. Establishing a minimum retail price. It's amazing about the relativity of prices. It's gone up now to somewhere between $22 and $26 for a pack of cigarettes, and I was chatting with someone the other day about the cost of their smoking, and I said, it's about $24, isn't it? And she said, no, I only pay $19.70. I go down to that special place that sells it. I'm not quite sure what that special place is, but they obviously give it cheap, And she said, it's only $19.70. A couple of years ago, they've been moaning that it was $19.70, So it is very relative. So price needs to continue to go up. Access, so there's some really good ideas about access, requiring all existing tobacco retailers to transition out of selling tobacco. Disallowing sales of tobacco products on alcohol on licensed premises, and introducing a tobacco-free generation. That's an amazing idea. That's a generation that will never be allowed to buy cigarettes. So these public health physicians, they think very laterally about some of these things to do. This, of course, is ideas in the public health arena. They're not politically accepted ideas as yet. Changing the appeal, so removing all additives and innovations from tobacco products, because people like smoking because they enjoy it. I mean, they enjoy the nicotine, but they actually enjoy a lot of the other stuff that's in there. People do enjoy, it's a really good way to ask somebody about smoking. I mean, what do you enjoy about it? Because actually it's quite a pleasant activity when you first start until you get addicted. So removing some of that. Introducing a nicotine reduction policy to restrict the sale of tobacco to low nicotine products. So you can see there's a really good ideas that are coming up here. And then doing more of what we already do, and this is the kind of part that we come in. So ensuring safe access to safe alternative nicotine delivery products, so we're going to talk about that, and I think Vaping to Quit comes into that process, and introducing standardised packaging and enhanced pictorial warnings. So you don't go into a dairy anymore and see the cigarettes stacked up so that they actually effectively are an advertisement. You don't see that now. We've moved on past that. Enhance mass media and social media campaigns, including about smoking cessation, sport, and about the goal. So there does need to be more mass media, and social media is a very, very powerful tool which we are really just beginning to start to use, and which we in primary care could be using a lot more effectively as well. Enhancing targeted smoking cessation advice and support, so that is exactly where we come into the process. Extend smoke-free environment legislation to include outdoor areas and vehicles carrying children. I mean, that's, kids shouldn't be in vehicles that are smoking. And this is music to me. If this happens, it's great. The Innovation Fund, more money in smoking, because we've got a bit of a hollow in the money situation at the moment. There's not that funding going out there. You know, a couple of years ago, lots of innovative ideas and projects going, and we're not doing those anymore. And health needs that to kick things along to get some of these ideas into practice. We are doing okay. I mean, this is the general trend down, so you can see that from the mid-90s, there's a dramatic reduction in smoking. We're down nationally to around about 15%. This is the impact of tax changes. So every time the tax goes up, you see a dramatic reduction in the amount of tobacco that's smoked. And then it's human behaviour. We had a bit of behavioural economics 101 there before, behaviour goes back up, but not quite to the same, and then it goes back down. This was what happened when the display ban occurred. So, you can see the effect of these public health activities going in. So this is the stuff that our public health colleagues are helping us achieve, and it's really important because this is driving people to want to quit, and then we can pick up on that. Some of these people will quit on their own, but that's hard to do, and most people do need some sort of help. Just to reiterate, because we've already had a slide on this, the difference in ethnicity and the fact that if we're aiming for 2025 on current information as a total New Zealand population, we're not going to get there till somewhere down here. For the non-Māori population, we're not too far off, but take a little bit longer. But for the Māori population, you can see how long it will take. And I mean, that's just a graph, but you and I know that translates into serious mortality and morbidity amongst our Māori patients as the years go by. And what we will be seeing as Māori patients with, and do see, well, first of all, dying younger, and secondly, having a lot more health problems. And so this just shows the different ethnicities, and we've touched on this already in Catherine's slide before, but you can see the prevalence rates, Māori the highest, Pacific next, European, and Asian the lowest. And so this translates very much into a need, one, to focus on target and priority groups, and two, on an awareness that these groups are much more likely to have smoking-related complications. And the age group thing is interesting because, so really just, I know this is remind information for you, but the really young people that has actually worked, that the price is going up, and maybe some of the stuff that's been happening in schools, and the smoking in school stuff is just like way down now. So the smoking's now being taken up after that period of time and carried on through that sort of 18 to 35-year-old group. That's the target group where we've got to do. And if you stop after that, as I've shown, you're actually okay. So you can see that's a huge part of the smoking population that we do need to address and work with. And of course, that is the hardest part, because the people who are likely to discuss and want smoking from you, they're likely to be at least down this end. Those are the people that are kind of in the way of coming to doctors and nurses and willing to be upfront and address that. And this is hard work for us to be doing this, and this is why I think that social media stuff is some of where we need to go, because that's the entry point for that. And then this is just a reminder. These are Hayden McRobbie's slides. Actually, he stole them from Professor West, his a UK-based colleague. Just to remind, it's Professor West's first law of smoking cessation, and it's the number of ex-smokers is the number of smokers who try to stop and the probability of success. So it's a very simple little equation. The number of smokers who try to stop for us is directly related to really how well we do our ABC. The more people we ask, the more likely we are to actually get people engaged in being interested in smoking. And the probability of success is how much involvement we have in an active cessation support. And what we know is that to get successful quit, to get increased probability of success, if you look at the number of people that are successful unassisted, it's very low, and it goes up as you provide support. But if you give NRT, it's way more successful. If you give Zyban, it's more successful. Nortriptyline, about the same, and Champix, the most successful. But for all of those items, if you add in behavioural support, you virtually double the effectiveness. So there's a very simple message comes out of those slides. As clinical people, we should be prescribing and providing behavioural support. And that means either we provide it and that is some quality behavioural support, or we should be referring in for specialist cessation support to do that. So if there's one message that comes out of this part of the talk, it's that GPs and practice nurses should be encouraging people to consider going on Zyban, Nortriptyline and Champix, and making sure that they get behavioural support as part of that process. And so the question then comes, where does vaping fit into this process? So I just really want to share some information about vaping that's come from a just published online survey of 218 New Zealand vapers, where 3/4 of them were no longer smoking, and the remainder had significantly reduced their tobacco use. So this was an internet-based online survey that's just been come out of New Zealand, and one of the authors of this was Maria Glover, who was presenting here. It was either last year or the year before. So these are just some of the comments that came out of that paper. Vaping is widely used by smokers as a means of cessation, so it's already happening, you know. So if we get on this and start looking at vaping as a means of cessation, all we're doing is doing what people have already nutted out for themselves, and for an avoidance mitigation of relapse to smoking. And that's really important, because the biggest problem we have with helping people to stop is, of course, the relapse rate. Many of them just start again. And so here is a way of helping people avoid relapse. Vapers planning to quit will tend to start with models that look like a cigarette and then move on to explore more powerful e-cigarette models. So I'm going to show a couple of pictures of what a looky-likey cigarette would be in a minute. But these ones down the bottom, these are the ones that I'm currently using as the introductory kit for people if I'm doing vape to quit. They tend to start with tobacco and menthol flavour, because that's what they're used to, but then they tend to shift to other flavours. So people like to stick with what they're kind of used to, but you know there's over 500 other flavours that you can choose from. Not any one shop's going to have them all, but there are many, many other flavours. And what tends to happen is that people shift over time. Vapers may both smoke and vape initially, but will reduce their exposure to tobacco over time, gradually stopping. So this is what people who had stopped on their own accord, 3/4 of this group had stopped on their own accord, this is the message that they gave back. So we've built this basically into the protocol so that you when you start, you don't expect somebody to quit, you allow people to vape and smoke at the same time. There were actually very few adverse effects of vaping reported. So we've got a great handout on the desk out there, which has got some information about vaping, which does include some of the minor irritants that occur, but actually most of them didn't report. You can overdose on nicotine. I guess they started off and thought they'd puff away quite seriously and took in quite a lot of nicotine. Interesting comment about weight gain, not usually seen when smokers switch to vaping, although it's common when people stop smoking. So I found that quite an interesting comment that came out of the survey. Most people use e-cigarettes to quit enjoy vaping. So that's actually quite interesting, really, because I'm not sure how much you enjoy wearing a patch or using the gum, or I don't know if you enjoy being on Champix, you know. I mean, it's good for you and it helps you quit and you're going to get a lot out of it, but I wouldn't say it's probably that enjoyable as an activity, but people reported that they enjoyed this, although it's very interesting that when you talk to quit coaches when they're working with people on e-cigarettes, the comment that new users of e-cigarettes often make is that actually this is a bit different from smoking. It doesn't taste exactly like smoking, and there's often a little transition period where you need to encourage people to stick with the e-cigarettes because it isn't smoking, and that's because Smokers have had a long time to get it just right. What all those large number of chemicals that have been added in there have been added in there to make it a pleasurable experience. And well, I don't think we're necessarily there with e-cigarettes yet. Exploration of different types of e-cigarette, different nicotine strengths and different flavours is common. So people will experiment. So this was what stopped me from thinking I'll buy a whole lot of e-cigarettes and give them out to my patients to start with, because people actually like to experiment. So they're not going to stick to one thing. They're going to go to the vaping shops and buy different products. And it's probably an important aspect of successful vaping experience, so playing around with it. The biggest difficulties, I think this is quite critical, the biggest difficulties that vapers experience are in the supply of nicotine, the quality of the equipment, and the advice and support available. So if we're going to be successful with Vaping to Quit, if we're going to help people do that, we've got to make sure that they have got a place that they can get nicotine available. Now, it's still not legal to sell nicotine in New Zealand, so you can buy nicotine from the internet suppliers, and a lot of people do that. And import it, you're allowed to do that, that's legal. And a lot of vaping stores give nicotine away, they don't sell it. They sell products, that's where they make their money, they give the nicotine away, because it's not actually that expensive if you're not taxing it. And so that's how they get past that. But the thing to make sure about is that they have access, because the commonest issues that someone vaping who you're trying to support to quit will come back with is they'll say, I ran out of product, or I forgot to charge the device, or something broke down on it, you know? This is especially with the least expensive ones. And then what happens is, I just went back to smoking, you know, I just grabbed a cigarette. And once they're back, they're back. So we have to pay attention to making sure that they are aware that they've got the supply, and that means that really they need to be linked in with a vaping supply place. Otherwise, we're going to have to do that, and I don't think that's our job to be doing that. So they've got to be linked in with somewhere that they've got confidence in that can meet their needs in that way. And the quality of the equipment, the starter stuff that I showed you before, $25, that's only going to start them. That's not going to last the distance for somebody to quit unless they go on a very quick countdown, and it may do it in that situation. Now there's lots more information, so this will be available through the copies of the talk will be available, so there's links. There's the Ministry link, the Health Navigator link. The UK National Centre for Smoking Cessation's got a great link. That's probably got the most comprehensive information. Quitline's got some good information. And then at the top, the consumer review website, ecigreviews.net, that's from the consumer's viewpoint. And actually, sometimes you can learn a lot by just going on the users' websites and looking at what they say about it. This particular one, eCig Reviews, these are just two quite keen vapers. They're ex-smokers. They're in Vape to Quit. They're lifetime vapers as far as I can see. But they have personally tried virtually every product on the market, and there's a lot of products on the market, and they give recommendations about different ones. So they've recommended, so that's a cigar-like up the top there, and they've recommended 3 different types, and they've recommended for advanced users 3 other types. So that's their recommendation. You can buy through their website. So I think there might be a bit of a cut going off there. I'm not too sure about that. But for every picture that you see there, come back a month or 2 later and there'll be other pictures. And that one that I saw for $25, so that one up the top there, that's $50 for those cigar-likes. But that one for $25, that wasn't there 2 or 3 months ago. So that's just new, but it's very widespread, the $25 one, the e-leaf one. So that's the one I'm using, because the people who we're trying to reach here with Vaping to Quit, they're not likely to have a lot of spare cash in their pocket, and $25 versus $50 is quite important. Just to let you know briefly how they work, it's worth going on Google and just Googling how do e-cigarettes work, because obviously there's a lot to it, and the more you get into it, the more you realise that there is to it, and there's quite a lot of even physics equations in there if you're really into that stuff, which is great. But basically, what you're doing is you're superheating nicotine liquid in here. It gets into here by going down a wick, so it's stored in here, travels down the wick, and it's superheated, because it's superheated from here, and that battery superheats it. So that's what happens. So you've got a little device with a battery which you've got to therefore charge up, but you buy a very expensive one, the battery will last, you don't have to keep charging it. and you can either refill nicotine or you can put cartridges in there. They're very simple, but they're all different. And when we come back in a year's time to touch base next year, there'll be a whole bunch of different ones there as well. So that's one of the reasons why we don't want to own the space around the products. We just want to own the space around the behaviour. So what can we do? Vaping to quit. First of all, who's it for? I think it's a last resort. Okay. It's an NRT equivalent approach, so it's not as effective as Zyban, nortriptyline and Champix. Some studies show a little bit less, some a little bit more effective than NRT, but that's about where the effectiveness of it is. So I think if you can start people on Champix or Zyban, you're going to have a much better success rate than here. But this is for the people who tell you, I've tried that, or I don't want that, or I'm not interested in that, or they like the novelty idea of this, or for those people who might not even actually be ready to stop, but you say, have you had any experience with vaping? Because most smokers have borrowed a vaping device off someone and had a puff or two. So, most people have had. What was that like? Have you thought about just playing around with one? Why don't you buy one of these ones, these e-leaf ones, that's only $25. Next month it'll be something else I'm recommending. And just have a play around with it and get used to it. And then when I catch up with you next, or maybe can you come back next week, or maybe I'll get somebody to phone you in a week, we'll have a talk about how's that gone, and shall we take it a little bit further? So that's my entry point for those people. Okay to smoke and vape at the same time, okay to use vaping in patches at the same time. If you use patches, you're going to probably vape a little bit less, obviously. No one vaping method that's going to suit everybody. So while I'm recommending a basic outline of a protocol, it's a theoretical protocol because every single smoker is obviously going to be different. Lots of people will just quit by themselves. So the actual vaping to quit protocol, recommend that people start with a strong level of nicotine. So that's particularly if they have an addiction to cigarettes, in the sense that you can measure, say, by how long in the morning before they smoke. So that's the quickest way to find out how addicted somebody is. Do you smoke kind of like as you put your feet out of the bed in the morning? Have you got a smoke in your mouth, or within the first couple of minutes, or could you last till morning tea without having a smoke? That gives you some kind of sense of it. If they've got to smoke straight away, then they've got dependence on nicotine. They will need a strong strength or even a very strong strength. If they're 2 packs a day people, I don't know if anyone can afford to be anymore, but if they were, they obviously need a very strong strength. So the standard strong strength is 18 milligrams of nicotine per mil. That's a 1.8% solution. And for a very heavy smoker, 24 milligrams per mil or 2.4% solution. So that's where most people need to start. If they say they're a social smoker, if there is such a thing, and they only smoke 8 or 10 a day, which is kind of enough to keep your addiction at bay, they might want to start on a slightly lower strength. For user blog advice on starting, I've given a blog there. So this blog is actually like different ways of going about starting. So this information will be in the slides that you can access, but you can Google it yourself. That's not difficult to find. There's loads of different advice about how to start. And what I have done is I have taken that URL link and I've put it in a text outbox, and I just text it to people. I say, hey, you might want to know a bit more information about this. Here's a text. I send it while we're in the consultation, and then they can click on that on their phone and actually get that information straight away. So dual vaping and smoking is common. NRT may help the transition to start with, but that's where we're going to start them. Then stopping smoking can happen in whatever way. So it can be allowed just to happen over some weeks or months. There are some people who won't want help and they will just want to come off themselves. And 2/3 of the smokers that are surveyed did just stop. Most of them stopped over a period of 6 months. That's quite a long period of time, and you don't know which ones they are, and you don't know which ones are going to go back to it. I'm not personally that in favour of it, but sometimes it's the only option you're going to get. Play around with this for 6 months and see how you go. Or you can give a named quit date, and that's actually quite a good way of starting it. Once the person is only vaping, they're an ex-smoker. So we code them as an ex-smoker once they have changed completely to vaping. Then you drop the nicotine vaping liquid strength. Everybody thinks that their experience is universal and everyone should do it the same way. So if you go on the net, you'll find this is how you must do it. As clinical people, we know that one person's experience is not actually true. But so some people are recommending you just cut down at 1 to 2 intervals. So that's from 18 or 1.8% to 12 milligrams. That's a medium strength, 1.2%, to 6 milligrams. That's a low strength, 6 milligrams per mil or 0.6%. So these are the standard nicotine liquids that are available. So you just cut down 18, 12 and 6 at 1 to 2 weekly intervals. Many people will reduce more slowly. I don't think it matters. You choose what's going to work for that person. It's a bit like fishing, you know, you've got to let the fish in and out until you actually do catch it. From low strength, you can replace the nicotine with non-nicotine vape liquid. So it's actually quite good for them to continue vaping even after they take the nicotine out, because that keeps that behavioural component of it going. You can then wean off the non-nicotine vaping liquid as ready. Anyone that's been involved in a, say, alcohol detox, you'll recognise this is exactly the same thing that we're doing. Getting people off benzodiazepines, this is exactly, we don't have to do that much these days, but there was a time when we had a lot of people on benzos and we had to get them off. That's the kind of process. It's just a countdown process. But it's a supported process. It's the behavioural support that you're offering that allows the person to be able to do that. So, providing extra support, we either do it ourselves. There are some people that are frequent attenders at the practice. There are some people that you might be able to contact on a regular basis. You can set it up as a routine task list. You can ask Quitline to do it. If you're asking Quitline to do it and you're using the Manage My Health referral link, you can ask Quitline in the referral thing there, I want phone support, texting or online support, or you can text them online websites. So there are online websites that the person themselves can look at. And then finally, just to finish off, having said vape to quit, it's great, but I just want to return to the main message, which is prescribe to quit. That's actually more important than vape to quit. And there is a paper called the Eagle Study. If you haven't come across the Eagle Study, Google Eagle Study. This is a study comparing Champix, Zyban, nortriptyline and placebo in patients with mental health and non-mental health histories. And it was the landmark study because it showed that it is okay for us to use these products in people with mental health histories. There's very good information in there, but it also showed very good success rates of WICs, as we expected. Champix is the most successful. So the overall message is prescribing is best, but the backup message is when that doesn't work, let's go for vape to quit. Okay, lovely. Thank you very much. I just finished on time.